Listeners, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Well podcast. This is Brandon Holland, your host, BW Holland 32 on social media, and really cool episode planned for you today. And we're actually going to be talking to you and helping you with your social media. I have with us a social media expert, someone who is helping people like you communicate their message and tell their story, Mr. Sam Toles. Sam, welcome to the show.
Brandon, it's an honor to be here, dude. I love your show. I've become a recent fan, and I was so tickled when you asked me to come on board.
Man, I'm glad to have you. So let's just kind of jump right in and give our listeners a little insight onto who Sam is, a little bit about your background, and just kind of how you got into what you're doing today.
Sure. Look, I have been very passionate about local government since, growing up. My uncle actually won the Pulitzer Prize, was the cartoonist for the Washington Post. So I was sort of born into a family that was civically minded. And in my early 30s, decided to run for elective office and was elected as a city council member in Cathedral City, California, which is just outside of Palm Springs. And it was a truly magical experience. Now, as those who listen to your podcast well know, being an elected official doesn't pay the bills, and I had built a career in media, starting, working at the studios at Paramount and Warner Brothers and all the sort of big name studios. But technology is changing everything, and so sort of my hallmark in my career was understanding where technology was going and chasing it as fast as I could. And so, I remember talking about streaming before streaming existed, and I said, if only you could do this streaming thing, which we can see on our computers, but if you could port that to television, that would be a transformative business. When Netflix did it, I ended up buying stock and becoming obsessed and moved into streaming. And then I saw social media happen. And the story goes that I was hired by the Vimeo platform, which actually ended my council term early because I moved from beautiful Palm Springs, California to ice cold New York City.
Oh,
But I
wow.
began to meet the young creators that were working on YouTube and Vimeo and seeing their following. And I remember I was at a convention and with all these YouTubers who were like 13 years old at the time. This was 2014. And I looked up at the ceiling and I said, everything I know about media is wrong. And if I don't completely relearn from the beginning what it is that makes these kids tick, that in 2024, they're going to be adults and the media business is going to be very challenged. And all of that turned out to be true, but it set me on a journey to become obsessively focused on how social media works, the intricacies of it. And I had the privilege of leading MGM Studios Digital after Vimeo, and then ran Bleacher Report, which is the world's largest sports social media business. And I've worked with the most incredible influencers, from Michael Phelps and Sonia Richards-Ross, who are gold medalists in the Olympics, Saquon Barkley, and most recently with the team at Mr. Beast, who's the largest YouTuber on the planet. So I've had the experience of working with social media for over a decade. And the TLDR of it is that I retired because I'd made enough money and wanted to do something I felt passionate about. My heart called me back to local government, but I didn't want to run for office. And I decided, you know what? I am the world's foremost expert in this thing, social media, and governments seem to be really perplexed by social media. I think I can help. And so I founded CiviSocial to basically bring my magical formula to local governments and to help small and medium-sized local governments be great at social media.
That's incredible. And, speaking from experience, just from being on the inside and seeing it on so many different levels, is something that's needed. Government doesn't tell its story well, and could definitely take some pointers on how to communicate better too.
Well, Brandon, you used the perfect term, which is story. And I think that a lot of times local governments are simply thinking about this in terms of information. How can we get the information about the things that we're doing to the residents that we're doing them for? And I think that construct is flawed because human beings naturally process and absorb story far more than information. And in a time when there was a limited amount of information, when there were three channels or the radio or newspapers, people's ability to absorb information was much higher because the constant bombardment of information was not present. But the evolution of social media streaming and media technology has basically made us a 24-hour fully bombarded, human race. And so we need to go back to something that's more simple, that's more digestible, that's understandable. And that is story. And I love that you said that.
Yeah, I've one of the things that kind of stands out to me, especially here lately, is some of the greats, and Disney comes to my mind, and they made their identity around storytelling, and then you had Pixar, which amplified helping others tell their story, and so those types of avenues and being able to communicate, it's needed, and I think it's one of the better ways that we as people receive information as well.
It is. And since you mentioned Pixar, I've got a book recommendation for your audience. Creativity Inc. is the story of how Pixar understood and discovered how to tell story. And it's really, I think, apropos for local government and audiences in this space because, you know, the people that founded Pixar came out of tech. They were not natural storytellers. They were uncomfortable. They built products. They built like B2B kind of software products. That was the founding and origins of Pixar. And movies were kind of by accident. When they got into that business, they had to learn about story. And the story in Creativity Inc. is sort of how they changed their mindset and embraced that. And it kind of is really, the story of Civi Social. What I do, it's what we do. We come in and really help cities understand the construct of how to turn information into story and how to do that in a medium that requires a lot of understanding of how the algorithm and technologies work.
Man, so Creativity Inc. I finished that book about 2 months ago, and it is one of my favorites. But also, this being a leadership podcast, one of the things that I took from the book is how they talked about, Steve Jobs' leadership style. And, one of his largest challenges was getting those two completely different groups of people to work together on the same projects and toward the same goals and stuff like that. So there's some leadership lessons in there as well. If you're listening, I think you should definitely pick that book up. It's definitely helped me in my leadership and my creativity.
Two thumbs up.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Sam, let's help some people get better. A large portion of our audience here is city managers or folks in local government. What are some things that you're seeing that we need to maybe do a little bit differently or do
Yeah.
better in as far as the social media goes in government?
So I think the first thing is a lot of government is stuck in what I call social media 1.0. And what I mean by that is it's Facebook, right? It's Nextdoor. It's text-based or photo-based, and it's information exchange. It's almost as if you're writing a press release and then sort of like summarizing it and posting it on social. And I think the other thing that I notice very common in local government is that the PIO or the communications people see social media as second to or third to their outreach to, say, local news or the radio or the local rag or printing flyers or running events. Like it's always a secondary form of communication. And that flies in the face of data, quite honestly. You look at the data, more people are getting their news directly from social media than any other source. Newspapers, print, is down to 4% of people, according to Pew Research, that are getting their information from the newspaper. Is your PIO or your communications person only spending 4% of their time on that? My thought is probably not. They're using their available resources to focus on old media. And what that looks like in social is a lot of kind of someone along the way, maybe a marketing consultant, told them that there's this tool called Canva, and it makes pretty images or templates, and they go and they find a fun happy hot dog day image, and they think that, well, I put my post on social, it's happy hot dog day, and then it's just, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't tell a story. It's just performative. And so what I like to say is, first and foremost, video is the medium that you need to focus on. Video content performs 10x better than photo or flat text-based content and builds and drives engagement. The second thing I say is, look, this cannot be the job of one person, one communications person, or even a team. You got 2 or 3 people that are managing the whole communications infrastructure. There's no way that they can properly tell your story. But the good news is you have cops, firefighters, lifeguards, parks workers, code enforcement officers, many of whom are young, many of whom are social native, love social media, probably do it on their own, certainly consume a lot of it, and understand the language of social media. Those folks are going to be the faces of your city, and they're going to tell your story through the work that they do in video, and it will transform your social media, because that's what people are going to resonate with. Oh my gosh, this cop is my neighbor, and he spends his time protecting our community. Oh my God,
Yeah.
this parks worker is making our park special and is advocating for, cleaner spaces and cleaning up, the trash that's collecting in the park. Like, seeing people do it takes away this unfortunate negative mystique around government. People see government as the shield or the city hall or the parking ticket when they stayed an extra couple minutes, or the tax bill. And if your social media looks like that, the relationship that you have with government is going to be negative. But if
Right.
your social media is filled with wonderful neighbors and people that are doing work on your behalf, that are working for you as the residents of that community, people see value in local government. People feel connected. Social media, in its essence, is all about a parasocial relationship. It's about building a person to person connection with the audience on the other side of that screen. And so that mindset of, doing it as a chore or doing it in an uninspired, non-creative way has to be broken. And we have to bring story and the people that do this work to life.
That's right. That's right. We gotta start having fun with it, man.
Yes.
Like
And I
we
have a
gotta
story
have
about that.
fun.
I have a story about that.
Let's hear it. Let's
Okay.
hear it.
So I did a little thing for Halloween. I did this thing called the City Hall is Not Scary contest. And I asked cities that had worked with me and cities that we've been talking to basically make a 20 second to 2 minute video that sort of flips Halloween on its head. And, City Hall is a welcoming, inviting, intriguing, interesting, connective place, but make it spooky and make it seem like it might be scary, but then demystify it. Like, that was the challenge. And use the hashtag City Hall is not scary. And so half dozen cities went ahead and participated and did this challenge. The videos they created were unbelievably good, like really spectacular. But that's not the point. The creative output is the end goal, and that's great. But every single city that was not a client of ours, because our clients already know what the magic is, but every post from every city manager was, I cannot believe how much fun this was. I cannot believe how connected the teams felt. Everybody
Yeah.
wanted to participate. Everybody wanted to engage in this activity. And we're so proud of this work. And people are really responding to it. And I'm like, yes, exactly. That's
Yeah.
what social media can do. It can connect the cops and the firefighters who at times, maybe don't talk to each other, or code enforcement in parks, to get together to do these projects and to have fun. And the final point is, one of the things local government struggles with a lot is inspiring young people.
Yes.
Inspiring young people to aspire to a career in civil service. You know what young people want to do right now? According to research, 37% of millennials and Gen Z, their top job choice is being a content creator. If
Yeah.
you work with your young staff and say, for 10 minutes a day, a small part of your work, when you're out on the beat or you're doing your job, pull out your phone, make a video, and give it to the comms person to program on social, that creates a much deeper loyalty, engagement, excitement about coming to work and about doing the work because they're doing something they love. By the way, they'll tell their friends, like, working in local government's awesome. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you got young people knocking at the door because they want to be a part of your story.
Right. Right. And we've got to bring them on board. We've got to be able to share that. Man, that's powerful. So I'm
I
sure
believe
you've
in this mission, my friend. I am all in to help governments because they can do it and it's not hard. That's the beauty.
right. Yeah. Yeah. We just need to see it differently, I think. Um,
100%.
and I'm sure you see a lot, just from the nature of what you're doing. What are some of the things that you're seeing that just kind of drives you nuts whenever you see it? Like, I wish this was different, or I wish they wouldn't do this, or something like that.
Yeah, no, look, I will say there's a few frustrations. The first is I'm blessed because I was an elected city council person. So I have at least some credibility when I go in the door and talk to government and say, hey, I can help you. And by the way, here's my membership card. I'm a member of the local government club. But what I find is a lot of folks in local government are naturally suspicious of people with a background or a resume in the private sector. And that is frustrating, right? Because not all of us are, money hungry sort of demons looking to exploit local government. There are folks that come from the private sector, like myself, who aspire to help the public sector because we're bringing a perspective and an expertise that's been really crafted and honed outside of government, but we want to bring that to government. And I
Yeah.
times I find that there's resistance to that. So that's been a little frustrating. The other thing I find that's often frustrating is, when I talk to city managers, 9 times, 10 times out of 10, they're in. They get it, they understand it, they want it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll get introduced to a city manager and they'll say, talk to my comms folks. And I sort of have that deep sigh groan in the deep depths of my soul. At times I'm surprised. There are two kinds of comms folks that I find. One comes out of local news, was maybe an anchor or worked at a local news station. And they're like, I'm a journalist and I've always done it this way and I'm always going to do it this way. And you're just coming in on my turf and this is my turf and get the hell out of here. Right. Like
Okay.
that's what they're going to say. And look, I'll call the city manager back and say, I can't work with you guys. Like I'd love to, but if the person leading this effort doesn't believe in the power of social media and storytelling and thinks that posting happy hot dog day on Canva is good and you're good with that, like that's okay. But the things that are great to sort of flip that is when I find a comms person who does come from that background, who's got, thank God, I've been afraid of this medium for so long. I don't know what I'm doing, or I know a little bit, but I'd love to know more. Like that is the most exciting conversation. So
Wow.
that's frustrating. And when it comes to, what governments are doing on social that frustrates me, my God, I mentioned it before. It's worth a second mention. Canva. Those pastel posts are maddening. So anytime I'm talking to a client, the first thing I'm going to do is look at their Instagram and sometimes look at their Facebook, but mostly if they have Instagram, that's where I'm going to go because none of them have YouTube. And by the way, we should definitely talk about YouTube because it's really important. But I'll go to their Instagram and I'll open the feed, and it's like Easter bunny eggs got puked out into the feed. It's just one post after the other post of these same templates. You could take any city and just like it's the same post, and I'm like the same feed. And I'm like, no one is going to follow this. No one is going to engage with this. And then you go in the likes and you go in the comments and there's like 3 likes and no views. It's depressing because I'm like, efforts being made here to facilitate or service this thing, but it's dead.
Yeah.
It's sad. And that's unfortunate.
Wow. So you touched on YouTube there. What should we be doing there? One of the things that this podcast has been trying to do is have a greater stance on YouTube and grow that in that area. From local government standpoint, I know most folks just stream a city council meeting or something like that, and that's it. But what should we be doing differently there?
It's look, YouTube is my favorite platform. It's because I ran Vimeo, and YouTube and Vimeo both were born in 2004. And so obviously YouTube was like our much bigger, much cooler, way cooler older brother. Or we were like the little scrawny kid that could barely, maybe, we were not walking as well or whatever. But like I was always jealous and obsessed with YouTube. And I've followed that platform for over a decade. Now, I'm going to tell you a fun fact that I bet your audience doesn't know. Let's imagine for a moment that I could snap my fingers and for 1 minute, laptops don't exist, tablets don't exist, and phones don't exist. The only visual medium that you can actually access for those 2 minutes is television. Now, if I told you the number two most watched platform on television is Netflix, that means the number one most watched platform on television is YouTube, excluding all of the views and all of the engagement they got on any other device. It is the top destination for people watching television in 2024. That line
Wow.
recently crossed, and the trajectory is crazy. Podcasts are an amazing opportunity to leverage YouTube. YouTube is focused on a couple of things. Podcasts are one of them. They really want content that is specifically geo-located. Actually, another trick of platforms in general that I think local government doesn't appreciate is, look, for Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and for Google, YouTube, they sell advertising. And it's really easy for them to sell advertising to Coca-Cola and State Farm and national advertisers. Where they make a lot of money and where they're really focused is regional targeted advertising. What does that mean for local government? It means that these platforms and their algorithms are adept at profiling, surfacing, and promoting content that is geo-specific or regionally specific, meaning if you understand the algorithm, if you understand how the machine works, your content can be surfaced much more effectively and targeted. And the great thing about local governments, you're not trying to be Mr. Beast, you're not trying to be Bleacher Report, you're just trying to reach your residents. And if you do it correctly, if you understand the machine, you have a better chance than anybody to do that. The other thing that YouTube is focused on, in addition to podcasts and longer form content, like deeper dives, is shorts. And YouTube Shorts it's kind of a flywheel. So shorts, and you know this because you're doing this in your podcast, you'll do a clip out of this show and it'll be a fun video where I say something really clever. Maybe it's the Netflix thing, right? And that'll become a YouTube short. And what that does is it's building audience and building repetition so that when you drop that city council meeting, or in your case, the podcast, or a longer, let's say there's a big initiative, they're building a new library or they're building a new park, and you want to go for a 30-minute or an hour deep dive on YouTube to talk about that, you got to build the audience flywheel. But Shorts, which has not existed until recently, is now designed to do that. And if you're creating content that is short form, the good news is, and the other platform I really think local government needs to pay attention to is TikTok, because it's where all of the trends are happening right now. It is where all of the content creation tools that generate those trends are found. CapCut should immediately replace Canva as your go-to tool for content creation. If you don't know what CapCut is, look it up. It's an amazing tool. I love it. But you can create content that originates on TikTok, and that content will populate Instagram, and it will also populate YouTube Shorts. And then you're going to build content around bigger events on YouTube Shorts, and it's magic when it works. But it doesn't require doing 3 different pieces of content for each platform. Like, you can optimize, and with AI tools, oh my God, like AI is changing the game. It's making social media creation easier. If I had half the tools available in AI right now, when I was at Bleacher Report a few years ago, I can't even imagine. I had a team of, hundreds of people. You don't need that. You just need a core group that are filming content, and then the AI can edit it and publish it and reformat it, and literally I had a city I was working with that was predominantly Spanish speaking. They never had Spanish social media. I said, look, you've got some Spanish speakers. Let's make some content organically in Spanish, but also let's take the content from your city manager and others that don't speak Spanish. I can use this tool, and magically their lips are moving and they are speaking in their own voice, but the words coming out of their mouth are Spanish.
That's
It's
incredible.
freaking amazing. It's great.
Man, that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
I got one more tool for your audience. It's not social media related, but
Okay.
I'm obsessed, and you're gonna do it, and it's gonna blow your mind. Every city manager needs this tool. I just discovered it this week. It's like the greatest thing I've ever found. So
Okay.
it is called Notebook LM. It is a Google product, and it is free, so it's awesome. You can take any document, no matter how complex, planning document, take an entire city council agenda, 50, 60, 100 pages long. You
Yeah.
load it into this thing, and it will create multiple forms of summaries. However you want to take the data, it will process the data and it will summarize it. And that's cool. But it does something else. It's called an audio summary, or I can't remember the exact phraseology, but basically we'll take the summary and turn it into a podcast just like this with two AI,
Wow.
a host and a conversation, and they're having a conversation and they're bantering and they're joking. And so I loaded Mr. Beast's strategy document in, and I asked it to do a podcast, but apply the learnings from that document to local government. And it spit out a 15.5-minute podcast, and it was brilliant. I mean, like, I couldn't have. It even recommended hiring a smart consultant like me, and I didn't even tell it to say that. It was just fabulous. But like, imagine being able to give your city council a 20-minute podcast that basically walks them through the agenda in a completely digestible way before the meeting. They'll think you're a wizard. So
Yeah.
check out Notebook LM. It's my favorite new tool. I'm obsessed.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be checking that out because I would much rather listen to something like that
Yeah.
anyways.
It's story, right?
That's
Like
incredible.
Google understood. And by the way, the weird thing, the fun part of this thing is they've inserted ad breaks. They haven't filled them with ads yet, but you can see Google's mind working. Like they're like, we'll be back after the messages, and we're back. And I'm like, why is that? Oh, yeah, they want to sell advertising. They got to make money somehow. I mean, they are giving away like this genius product for free, but like so clever, so interesting. But Google understands that storytelling is the way to actually have people process information, even in our own local government, taking that huge document and turning it into a podcast. Like that's how human beings can really absorb. And that's again, look, I could go on about that, but that's the thing.
Man, that's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, I want to switch gears just a little bit. What effects have you seen social media have on large movements? Like we just recently had the election, and so social media played a huge role in that. And so from and I guess marketing standpoint, what are some things that you noticed that they did well during that time?
Yeah, look, the election is interesting, and I'm a political nut. I consume way too much punditry, and I find I'm centrist, and so all politics frustrates me right now. I'm like right down the middle, but I do love the strategy, and so I really bought into the hype of like this election is razor close, and it's not going to all that stuff, and it seemed the closing message and this and that, and there was a certain narrative that the Kamala campaign had run a better campaign, and I actually bought in to that just as a campaign person. I was like, yeah, I think she's probably run a better, more like David Plouffe ran Obama's campaign. Like he's not a slouch, right? But I kicked myself afterwards, after the results came in, because I broke my own rule in understanding media. And I talk about this. I've talked about it on this podcast. I talk about it to every client. I just said it to you a couple seconds ago. Like social media is the number one consumed form of information on the planet, and people don't realize it. And this election, if there's one takeaway from this campaign, is 2012 style, even 2020 style campaigns are over. You have to reach your audience through storytelling and social media. And the other thing is, even though Twitter is a somewhat diminished platform, or X now is a somewhat diminished platform from a usage perspective, I mean, it's lost users, it's lost relevance. TikTok, Instagram are kind of the 10,000 pound gorillas, and YouTube is a different beast, but it's also a 10,000 pound gorilla. Like those are the three, and Facebook in its own way. Like, but just having access to the algorithm, and as somebody who's run a social media platform and understands the power of that algorithm, it should have been self obvious that that was an advantage that no one was really thinking about or counting on. And I believe that's what ultimately tipped the election towards Trump, is because Elon controls the technology behind Twitter. So what you see in your feeds can be curated, let's just say, to showcase different content to different people who might have different reception to that message. And so if you don't understand the algorithm, the building of the machine, and how to effectively use the machine, you are not going to be effective on social media, because it's part art and it's part science, and you need to understand both.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know, one of the complaints is, people were just tired of seeing it. But the thing is that they were seeing it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was very strategic and, always in your face. So you couldn't ignore it.
Look, I take my hats off to the people who ran that campaign, because they did a they did a different media strategy, a 2.0 media strategy, and it worked for them. Like they definitely outsmarted folks that were thinking in a traditional way. And look, you can have negative feelings about that, or you can have positive feelings. I choose to look at things very analytically, and I really follow trends, data, especially as it relates to media, and try to learn from it. Because, look, one of the complaints, I was at ICMA about a month and a half ago, and I talked to city managers. A lot of them are like, "Oh my God, please come, we need you," or they had questions about social, whatever it was. But I talked to one city manager at an event who goes, I have never, and will never allow my city to be on social media. And it was kind of shocking. I was like, okay, I respect you for that passionate position. I know social media is a pain. I'll use this analogy because I think it's one that everybody will understand. Since you mentioned Disney, I'll use one of their most iconic, newly acquired properties. Social media, in essence, is Star Wars, right? And in the core of Star Wars, there is the Force. We see the stormtroopers, we see the Death Star, we see the giant, like, imperial ships. The dark side of the Force is very visible, and we all are aware of it, and it exists. And social media, especially on Nextdoor, next in line Facebook, those comments, those keyboard warriors, those STPs, as I call them, the same 10 or 20 people that attack you every single day,
Yeah.
it's there. It's not going to go away. You can close your eyes, you can pretend it's not there, but the dark side of the Force is a part of social media and will be a feature for the rest of time, as long as the medium exists. But there is a positive power to the Force. You can, if you are brave enough to lean in and believe that there is a way to utilize this thing. And if you got to think again in the Star Wars terms, like a force is you can't see it, it's invisible. There's sort of the good
Right.
and the bad. You can lean into the good because you have the same access to the tool and to the power. And if you harness that power and you believe that you can do good with it, you can do amazing things. You can even defeat the evil empire if you're really good, right? But it requires, like Luke in the swamp with Yoda, like, you're going to have to face yourself. You're going to have to face this medium, and you're
Yeah.
going to have to find that bravery to venture forth. And I promise you, it's not a happy hot dog day Canva post, or it's trash collection Tuesday. Like,
Right.
that's not how you do it. That's I don't know what that is. It's just, maybe it's C3PO kind of puttering around and saying nonsense, right? Like, it's not going to win the war for you or win the battle of social media. You've got to
Right.
participate.
Yeah. So, before we wrap up, man, just one more thing that I think would really help our listeners. So, just somebody comes up to you, just very basic, and their goal is that they just want their social media to grow. What's your advice to that person? Just, somebody just want to grow.
It's a great question. It's actually quite simple. Every creator, including Mr. Beast, started with 0 followers. There are pictures of Jimmy, who's Mr. Beast's real name, celebrating 7 followers on YouTube. Right? He now has over 300 million. His average view, the average view of a Mr. Beast video is more than the Super Bowl every single time. Every week he gets more viewers than the Super Bowl. It's wild. But if you do these 3 things, you can be great at social media. Number 1 is consistency. If you're going to commit to anything, whether that's, you go to the gym and you get a personal trainer, the first thing they're going to tell you is you gotta show up, and you gotta do it, and you gotta do it on a regular basis. And if you futz around, or you do it infrequently, or you come on and then you go off, you're not going to make progress. So consistency is really important. The second piece is testing and learning, right? You need to understand what it is that is unique to you. What is the story that you're going to tell? Like, how are you going to connect with your audience? You really have to be thinking about who it is that you want to reach, and put yourself in their shoes. Like, what is it that they are looking for that I can offer? And then the fourth thing is creativity. You have to try things that are unique and be fearless of failure, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can be inspired, and there are tricks, like there are hacks to growth, right? Like, if you see a fun, again, this is why TikTok's so important. If you see a fun trend that's happening on TikTok that you might be able to pull in, that's unique to you and tells your story in a way that's, clever and viral, then do it, because it's going to get those views. And if you do that enough, it's going to build that audience. And like, that's a great hack, a good trick. But the creators that blow up are the ones that create the trend. And in order to do that, you got to fall on your face a whole bunch of times until you find that thing that people start to respond to. The one thing I'll tell you that I've done recently in my own LinkedIn feed, because that's the social media I focus on most, that's been surprising, is like, I talk a lot about stuff like this because I figure
Yeah.
my audience wants to know, today's video is about blue sky and all the things you need to know about blue sky. And those videos do well. Like,
Yeah.
I get an average of 1,000 views ish per video, which is good for LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn's a much different kind of platform. But I've been posting council comments, which always amused me during my time on city council. I always found, like, there's always somebody. There was a guy who thought there were UFOs. He'd come to every council meeting. He'd do this crazy thing. We'd all sort of roll our eyes. But it happens in every council, and they're highly entertaining.
Yeah.
And so I've been clipping out some of the more unique council comments that I've found. And these videos are getting 5, 6, 7,000 views on LinkedIn. And it's blowing my mind. I don't know why they're resonating, but once I saw the first one happen, now I know that at least part of my audience doesn't want to hear Sam just give advice about social media and talk
Yeah.
about, teamwork and all the stuff. Like, they want a little bit of entertainment. So
Right.
on a weekly basis, I'm going to give them that little piece of entertainment. That's going to grow my audience, because it's the algorithm's rewarding it. It's going to surface more people to discover me. They're going to follow my content because they're like, I love this weird council stuff. And then because likely they're in local government. Who else would find that stuff fascinating other than folks like us?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to get the information that I'm sharing on a regular basis, right? So, like, it's about having that fearlessness and that creativity as a part of your toolkit. But consistency, I think, is number one. You got to commit to it.
Wow. Yeah. Great advice. Great advice, man. Okay, dude. So, man, before I hate to end the show, but we'll
No, it's fine.
have to do
We can
this
do a follow
again.
up in a while if you want. We could have more fun.
Yeah, yeah, we have to. But before we go, where can our listeners find you? Where can they connect with you and your company?
Yeah, of course. So, easiest way to do it is the website. So that
Okay.
is, your www.civisocial, and that is spelled CIVI social, SOCIAL.com, all one word. I'm Sam at civisocial.com. So if you want to write to me directly, I'm always open for a conversation. And what I'll tell all my friends in local government who are interested, I don't do hard sales. Like I'm doing this from passion, and I don't want to sell you. Like, I'm not that guy.
Right.
When I go to conferences like ICMA, they're always like, do you have a booth? I'm like, hell no. I'm just here to drink and have fun with local government people. And if they buy my product, they buy it. But if you do take a meeting with us, I'm going to do a deep dive on your socials. I'm going to do a comparative. So I'm going to look at your city, and I'm going to look at a similar community. And it's always fun. That's my favorite part of those meetings, because it's always like, how did you know? I'm like, I used AI to figure
Yeah.
out who you're most and they're always competitive. Like, I showed Calabasas Beverly Hills stats, and they were pissed because Beverly Hills is doing better,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It gives you a baseline. It gives you like a head to head of like what's happening, what's your engagement, what does it look like, and what does it look like compared to somebody else. And then from there, I dive deep into the data. Like, why does this matter? What is happening on the platforms? It's a super educational thing. So even if you don't buy the Civi Social program, I'd love you to do it because it's transformative, and nothing makes me happier than transforming local governments. But you will learn a ton, and you will be better equipped to understand social media if you have that conversation.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Thanks for the info, and thanks for being on the show.
This has been a blast. I super, super enjoyed it. Thank you for the invitation, and wishing all of your listeners a happy holiday season, assuming this drops sometime, near the holidays
Yep.
ish, whichever holiday that might be. But happy holidays to everybody. And thank you again, Brandon, for giving me some time to talk about social media.
Absolutely. And to the listeners, hey, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Um, we'll have another episode for you in 2 weeks. Please feel free to connect with myself or with Sam if you need some help on your social and you're looking to grow in that area. And we will have another episode for you soon. Thanks.